Hello everyone, back at it again with another video. This is part 2 of an on the water unboxing series that I'm doing. And what you're looking at here is the Thunderhawk Lures Sergeant Lipless. And what's unique about this bait is that it's completely silent. So most lipless baits like a rattle trap or maybe a booyah one knocker, they have a lot of sound to them. They've got BBs or maybe a hard knock, rattles, and they're loud. Sometimes they're so loud you can kind of hear them resonating through the hull of the boat you're in. But this one's completely silent, and I like the idea. Seems like everywhere fishing pressure's on the rise, and the fish are getting harder to fool. So I thought having a completely silent lipless in my arsenal might be a good idea. Especially I'm fishing behind other anglers, or maybe I'm fishing conditions like this, bluebird skies, not too much wind. Maybe I could try a lipless without any rattles or noise at all. Catch a few more fish. First impressions is that it casts pretty well. Got a little bit of an overrun there, but that's okay. Based on the design of the bait, it's kind of a wide-bodied lipless. I thought it would have a wider shimmy to it, but it has a fairly tight action. So overall, I like it. I'm just playing around with it a little bit, yo-yoing it through the water column. I'm going to have to give that bait some more time, but it casts well. It is completely silent, as it says on the package. And I think that bait's going to be a winner. I just need more time with it. Alright, next up is a Lewis ATV crank in the 1.0 size. Right out of the package, it comes with good hardware, triple grip, split rings. But I don't have my BFS set up to throw it. So I'm just going to put that bait to the side. But I fished that a bunch. I have some videos on it. It's just a different color. I actually bought that color before, and I think on my second cast I got cut off by a pickerel. So I didn't have a lot of time to fish it. But that Lewis ATV crank 1.0 is a winner, and that's just another color that I wanted to have in my arsenal. It's like a green pumpkin craw, very natural. What you're looking at right now is a 13 fishing gordito. Now to me, it looks a lot like a wigglewort, like the old style wiggleworts. Dives to 7 feet, at least that's what it says on the lip. Normally I put that snap directly on the line tie, but this line tie is recessed. It's got a split ring in the line tie, and so I'm going to leave it just as is. It's 3/8 of an ounce, and you can feel it compared with some of the other lures that I'm fishing that are closer to a 1/2 ounce or even a little bit more than a 1/2 ounce. It doesn't cast as well as some of the heavier baits, even without a weight transfer. But it casts okay, and it dives pretty deep, and it has kind of a hunting action to it, especially if I reel it a little bit fast. That's a 8-to-1 Daiwa Fuego casting reel on there, and it reels in line pretty fast. So even if it doesn't look like I'm going that fast, the line retrieve speed is high, and so I'm actually pulling in, I don't know, 36 inches per turn, something like that. So it's pretty fast retrieval rate, and that bait is hunting in the water, which is rare. It's rare in any crankbait, and it's especially rare in lower price crankbaits. So that's going to be a winner, especially if you're fishing deeper rock, anywhere you'd fish a wigglewort. And those original wiggleworts are hard to find. I've got a few of them in my tackle trays, but I'd rather fish something like a gordito if I'm around pickerel or snags or anything like that. So that one will be going in the lineup for sure. Alright, next up we have a 13 fishing scamp. This has a reputation of being a loud crankbait. Let's listen to it. Yep, that's loud. It's got a metal lip, a bunch of BBs inside of it. And so a bait like this would be good in dirty water, stained water, conditions with a lot of wind and dirty water. That color is called regurgitated shad. kind of like that color. I've got that color in a jerkbait made by 13 Fishing, and I like that too. Anyway, a bunch of these 13 Fishing baits were on sale, and so I picked up a couple of them. One from each style of bait that I didn't have yet, just to try. I don't know if 13 Fishing is getting out of the hard bait business, but seemed like the inventory was getting a little thin. So I thought I'd pick up a few while they were in stock and I had the chance and they were on sale. First impressions is that it casts pretty well. It doesn't blow out when I'm retrieving it fast. And it is loud. I think all those rattles and BBs in there help with casting distance. I put it on a scale and it's just over a ½ ounce. What I did notice is that some of the 13 Fishing baits, they came with round bend BMC trebles, and some of the others came with triple grips, and I like the triple grips better. So for the 13 Fishing baits, the crankbaits that came with round bend trebles, I'm going to be replacing those and putting triple grips on them, and the ones that came with triple grips I'll just leave it as is for now. But overall, I think that's going to be a keeper in the right conditions. Lots of wind, dirty water. Right now I've got clear water, no wind, bright sun. So that's not the time for that bait. Alright, next up is the 13 Fishing Flat Daddy. This is their version of a flat-sided crankbait. It's got those round bend VMC trebles. Like I said, I'd prefer triple grips, or at least a hook with tipped-in points. Out of all the 13 Fishing hard baits, this is the one that kind of puzzled me the most. It's a flat side, so I was expecting kind of a tighter action, and it's not. It's got a wide wobble to it, maybe even wider than that 13 Fishing Scamp. I know it's kind of hard to see in the water right next to the boat because of the glare, but it has a really wide wobble. And so for me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. If I'm going to be fishing a flat-sided crank, the water's going to be cold, I want a tighter wobble. And if I'm going to be fishing warmer water, I'll probably be using a square bill like that ATV crank or the Scamp, or maybe a deep diving bait. So this one just didn't make a lot of sense to me. Maybe at the tail end of spring where the water's warming up but not really warm enough to throw a square bill. Maybe. Anyway, next up we have the 13 Fishing Warthog. This is a similar concept, I guess, to the Scamp, but it has a clear bill. It's not as loud, but it's a square bill, another version of a square bill. That color I think was called Dream Gill, something like that. Kind of natural tones with a chartreuse hit on the tail. Kind of like that idea. That's what it sounds like. It's not quite as loud as the Scamp, but another take on a square bill. Casts pretty well. I would say maybe not as well as the Scamp, just because it doesn't have all those BBs floating around inside of it. But it casts well. It casts better than the Gordito. Again, this bait's about a ½ ounce. It didn't have the kind of hunting action that the Gordito did, but I think overall it's going to be a fine square bill to add to the lineup. And I'm going to have to fish it a little bit more just to see how the fish react to it in places, you know, where I'm thinking a square bill is going to work. Right now I'm in the middle of like a clear reservoir and probably 30 or 40 feet of water, so this really isn't square bill territory. But I like it. On the package and on the bait, it's stamped on the Warthog that it says it'll run 2 to 4 feet, where the Scamp is a 1 to 3 foot runner. So pretty similar, but the Warthog gets a little bit deeper and it has kind of a duller sound to it. The scamp is really loud. Alright, next up we have a Shimano Macbeth shallow running. This is really a wake bait. A lot of companies have wake baits, and some of them, like I'm thinking of the Yozuri wake crank, that's a better crank than it is a wake bait. But this bait, I found out, is a true wake bait. Even if you try to get it to dive, it's only going to dive, maybe an inch before it blows out. It's got round bend trebles. Normally I don't like that on a crankbait, but this is almost a topwater. It really is a topwater. If you haven't fished wake baits a lot, sometimes they can be productive and it's completely silent, I should say that too. So wake baits can be productive, say for example, if you're on a topwater bite with say like a spook or a Megabass Giant Dog X, and your topwater bite dies. You can sometimes get them to eat a wake bait, whereas before they wouldn't come up for the topwater anymore. It has a nice V on the surface. I tried reeling it fast just to see what happens, and it blows out. So you can't reel it fast, but when you get the cadence right, and it's mostly a slower retrieve, it has a nice wobble on the surface, and it almost does a complete 180 left to right as it's coming through the water. And I think this is going to be great over weeds that haven't completely topped out, but there's not enough room for a scamp or a warthog or even that little ATV 1.0 crank. There's just not enough room between the weeds to run a traditional crankbait. And I think a wake bait like this is going to be money. So I was really impressed with this Shimano Macbeth 50S wake bait. And I can't wait to throw it more. Of all the crankbaits, this is probably the one that stood out to me the most. Alright, next up we've got a bunch of spinnerbaits to go over. It's the Booyah Covert spinnerbait, the Nichels Catalyst. There's a KVD Finesse spinnerbait and a ZMAN Power Finesse, double willow finesse spinnerbait. Let's do the Booyah Covert spinnerbait first. This one had, I usually favor double willow blades. And this one was like a chartreuse and white with a gold and silver blade combo. I would call this a full-size spinnerbait. And I'm just going to tie it on and see if it'll come through the water in a straight line and how it casts, all that stuff. Sometimes big blades like that like to catch in the wind. Now normally I'm going to fish all of these spinnerbaits with a trailer, some kind of swim bait trailer usually. But I'm not doing that right now. I checked to make sure that hook was sharp, and tying the knot I stuck myself in the thumb. Hooks are sharp. Alright, let's see how it looks. So far so good. It's kind of got an interesting bulbous keel design, which is supposed to keep it centered and running true. That rod is a Daiwa Arid X. It's a very inexpensive rod. It's a medium heavy power. They call it a fast action, but it's really more like a moderate fast. And I would say the power is more like a medium plus than a true medium heavy. But for what it is, it's great. And for the price, it's excellent. So the Covert, I think I got it in a 1/2 ounce. Casts pretty well, even with those big blades. Every once in a while I'm going to catch it on the wind though. I'm burning it in, and it burns pretty well. Sometimes if you burn a spinnerbait in, they have a tendency to blow out if they're not well balanced. And they'll either kick out to the left or right, or completely roll over on their side, or blow out of the water. This one seems pretty stable, which is a good thing, a very good thing. All right, let's tie on another one. Going through leader material like crazy, but that's okay. I want to see how all these spinnerbaits act and react. Next up, we have a Nichels Catalyst. This is another full-size spinnerbait. The color, I believe, is called Tactical Shad. It's white and purple with some flake in it. Right out of the package, the skirt seemed a little deformed. It uses like a ZMAN easy skirt, kind of a skirt with a rubber band molded around the skirting material. And I think just from sitting in the package for a long time, that skirt became a little deformed. I think when it's running through the water, it's not going to be a big deal because the skirt's going to naturally want to, you know, condense against the body there. But maybe the packaging could have been a little bit better. Not a big deal, just something I noticed. Right next to the boat, it swims pretty nicely. Casts pretty well. It's got pretty decent sized blades. Both of these are double willow blades, and they're both silver. To me, this looks a lot like a herring. That's what I had in mind when I bought this bait, is that it would look a lot like a herring. So I'm thinking about maybe some clearer water than that covert spinnerbait, herring fisheries, maybe a day where you had some clouds and some wind, and a day where they weren't too keen on a chatterbait. Sometimes you can get them to eat a spinnerbait. I'm burning it in just to see what happens. The covert spinnerbait was pretty stable. I would say this one is pretty stable too, maybe not quite as stable as the covert spinnerbait. Could see it tilt a little bit left or right. That's not a terrible thing though, as long as it doesn't completely blow out. And it's going to be a little bit different once I add a swimbait trailer too. Sometimes that's the hardest part, is getting the right swimbait trailer to go on that spinnerbait such that it'll still come through the water in an upright position. I had to change the camera batteries. I'm putting my gear away. I'm making quite a mess with this unboxing video, but that's okay. I will get it all cleaned up before I head for the barn. Alright, what's next? This is a KVD, I believe it's a finesse spinnerbait or compact spinnerbait. It didn't actually say on the packaging, and I forget because it's been a while since I ordered this bait. But basically it's a finesse or compact spinnerbait. And I think it's a 1/2 ounce, but it's just slightly smaller than the Catalyst or the Covert. Skirt looks good. Blades are just a little bit smaller. I'm tying a double wrapped clinch, which is just a simple clinch with an extra wrap around the line tie. Actually, no, that's a trilene knot because I went through both loops. Anyway, they're very similar knots. Trying to save a little bit on leader material. If you tied a polymer around a spinnerbait, you use a little bit more leader material. Right next to the boat, it seemed to swim pretty well. Casts all right. I'm doing a stop and go retrieve, trying to get those blades to flash. Throwing a few pops. And it's pretty well behaved. Oh, professional overrun there. You know what? That's probably my fault. can't blame the spinnerbait for that. Maybe I got a puff of wind on the cast. Some of those bigger blades on spinnerbaits, they like to catch the wind. Sometimes they can be a hassle on bait casting gear. Same with buzzbaits. Now I'm burning it in. It's fairly stable. It did want to blow out on top a little bit, more so than the others, and maybe that's just because it's a smaller spinnerbait. But overall, pretty good. I would fish this with a smaller swim bait on the back. Fall's okay. Sometimes I have bass pick up spinnerbaits on the fall. So overall, pretty good. It's kind of funny they didn't label that spinnerbait properly on the packaging. Don't know what's up with that. Now this last spinnerbait is the baby of the bunch. This is a 3/8 ounce double willow power finesse spinnerbait made by ZMAN. And this really is a finesse spinnerbait. The packaging is going to drive me nuts, but we will get through that eventually. So where this spinnerbait shines is on pressured fish, fussy fish, non-ideal conditions, cold water, where the fish aren't interested in chasing down a full-size spinnerbait. And the fish really like this. Now I've fished this spinnerbait quite a bit, and it really is a finesse spinnerbait. So what that means is you can't overpower it, because I've broken that wire with a fish on it, a nice fish. And so I'm always going to fish this bait in particular with a mono leader, even if I'm running braid on my bait caster, just for some added shock absorption. I'm not going to slap that spinnerbait against the water if I get some weeds on it. I'm not going to boat flip bass if I get a nice one, or even a small one. I'm going to always net the fish. And the best trailer I've found for this spinnerbait is a 3-inch ZMAN Slim Swims. It's a little slim swim bait, and it's quite durable. That color is called Mouse Rat, by the way. It's a good color. They have a couple good colors. After I wear out the skirt, I replace it with a smaller ZMAN Easy Skirt. And if I don't have one of those, I'll trim a fuller size ZMAN Easy Skirt. But yeah, the fish really do love them. And I've caught a lot of fish on this, especially when the water's still cold in the spring. But it is a finesse spinnerbait, and you have to baby it. And if you're not okay with babying a spinnerbait, then I would suggest you get a different one, because this one needs to be babied. Otherwise, you'll break them. You can't really burn it because it'll blow out. It really does best on a slower, steady retrieve. And you can pop it. You can pop that skirt material, make it flare out, make it flex, give it some secondary action. But the fish really do like it. Farm ponds, if you're on small bait, pressured fish, cold water, that spinnerbait has caught me a lot of fish. Just remember, you got to baby it. Alright, I got a few more for you. Swim baits. We've got the 6 cents whale. That's a 6-inch whale from 6 cents baits, next to Megabass 6-inch freestyle mag draft. Right away, you can tell they're pretty similar baits. You can see where 6 cents might have drawn some inspiration. The dorsal fins stick out more straight out horizontally. And I'm going to fish it on a weighted hook. This is a tin weighted hook, but something like an 8/0 beast hook. I've got a large size CPS spring on the nose, and the nose is a little bit more blunt than the freestyle, which I like, so it takes a large size CPS spring. I'm lining up where I want that hook to come out. It's pretty easy to rig. Those fins should act a little bit like stabilizers to keep the bait tracking true. Color combo is a little bit wild for clear water, but sometimes in clear water chartreuse can be a good color too. I've done well with copper truce. ZMAN has a color called copper truce in clear water. And the fish seem to like it. They respond pretty well to that bold chartreuse. Anyway, I think it's a bait you could fish in dirty water or in clear water. They got a few other colors too. Some of them are more natural than that bright chartreuse and blue. Things are getting a bit messy now. It's taking me longer to find what I'm looking for. I want to see how that bait swims right next to the boat. And it swims amazingly well. Not only does it have a really exaggerated tail kick, but it's got head wobble, which makes the whole body undulate. Now that's kind of a rare thing in swim baits, and I like it. I like it when that whole body that has that secondary action where the whole thing, not only does it have a little bit of body roll, it's got the tail kick, and it has the head wobble, and it has like a whole body undulation. It looks alive. And so, I mean, I've only fished this bait for 10 seconds at this point, but I already really like it. And it comes 3 to a pack, where the Megabass Freestyle comes 2 to a pack. They've got some good colors. I might run a bead of super glue around those eyes just to make sure they don't come off. But I really like that bait. This was a kind of a big surprise for me. It's got so much motion. Now you could probably, you know, if I didn't have a tin weighted belly hook and it was lead and pretty heavy, it might kill some of that head wobble and that body undulation. I don't know what else to call it. The whole body is shaking. So it depends a little bit how you rig it. But my first impression of this bait is very good. And I think this is going to work very well. I just need the right conditions for it. Some clouds, a little bit of wind, maybe a little bit earlier in the day or later in the evening, right before a rainstorm. Yeah, that's a winner. All right, next up we have a trout bait from Big Bait Company. Now to me this looks a lot like a Huddleston 68, where it's a 6-inch trout bait with an 8-inch tail. So you take the 8-inch tail from an 8-inch Huddleston and you glue it onto a 6-inch bait, you have the Huddleston 68. So that's what this reminds me of. It's a little bit tougher plastic, which I kind of like, because it only comes 1 bait per pack, unlike something like the 6 cents whale, which is 3 per pack. So I'm hopeful this bait's going to last a little longer. And it already had a hole in the top. And you know what? I'm going to say I must have got this bait in the winter and rigged it up just to see how it would look. I'm not going to blame the manufacturer on that. That's probably me. Same hook that I was fishing the 6 cents whale with. That's an 8/0 tin weighted hook. And it looks pretty good. Looks good to me anyway. It's got a exaggerated tail kick, some body roll. It doesn't have as much of the head wobble or the body undulation as the whale did. It's got more body roll and that Huddleston kind of subtle tail kick. But it has quite a bit of body roll, and that's from the oversized tail. Got a little bit of an overrun there. The bait cast well, that was my fault. And that's how I think I should be fishing it. Like a slow, steady retrieve. I could even imagine fishing this bait in the winter and just crawling it along the bottom. I could even put on a heavier weighted hook to keep it closer to the bottom throughout the full retrieve. Just creep that bait along. Some trout pond. It doesn't do well when you reel it fast. Kind of blows out, but I don't think that's how the bait should really be fished. It didn't really blow out. That's maybe too harsh. It just looked kind of ridiculous, like it was flailing around. So to me, this bait is one that should be slow rolled near bottom. Cast it out, let it sink down, hit the bottom, and then slow roll it back to the boat. And I think at the right pond and the right conditions, this bait is going to be just great. Yeah, something like that. Slow and steady. Just a slow roll back in. Okay, I've run out of lures and my boat is a complete mess. And I guess that means it's the end of the On the Water unboxing series for this summer. I'll do another one again after I order a bunch more baits. It's time for me to head home and clean up this mess. But thank you all for watching. Just like all my other videos, I'll list all the gear in the video description. Lures, colors, rods, reels, all that good stuff, line. So you can duplicate what I was fishing out here today. Hopefully have some success with the same baits in your home waters. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya!